Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. It's Tuesday, and as per usual, that means open forum. If you've got a question about the Catholic faith, if you've got a question about Catholic people, Catholic ideas, why we believe what we believe, what it is exactly that we believe, it's all welcome today. 888-318-7884 is the number. I am Cy Kellett, your host. In second hour, Jim Blackburn will be here to take your questions. First hour, Tim Staples in studio with us. Again, that number, 888-318-7884. And I want to stress in a particular way that if you are not a Catholic, or if you maybe used to be a Catholic, these days are for you as well. You're welcome to call 888-31-TRUTH. 888-318-7884. Tim Staples, our first hour guest, is Director of Apologetics and Evangelization here at Catholic Answers, the author of many things, including Nuts and Bolts, and his most recent major work, Behold Your Mother, A Biblical and Historical Defense of the Marian Doctrines. Tim will be here in just a second, so we are welcoming your calls while we await Tim's arrival. But I did want to just make a quick mention, if I could, of World Youth Day in Panama. If you were at World Youth Day, or if you'd like to call us and tell us about what happened, or maybe you heard something said there that you'd like to share with us, we would love to hear from people who were at World Youth Day in Panama. It's a little bit strange. We were trying to figure out around here, why was it didn't seem like it was as, I don't know what the word is, hyped, I guess, as World Youth Day usually is. And a good part of the reason we finally figured out was it's in the winter, and we usually think of that as in the summer. And it being it was in the summer, but for people in the Southern Hemisphere, and there's just not as many people in the Southern Hemisphere. But it did indeed happen last weekend. The Pope said all kinds of fascinating things there. Among them, Jesus is not a passing fad. That was the big quote that I got from it, and he is right on about that. So if you are among those who went, we'd love to hear from you. 888-318-7884. I was just mentioning Tim about World Youth Day in Panama. Have you been to a World Youth Day? Ever been to one of those?
I have not.
I have never been to a World Youth Day either.
Yes.
And I'm going to go to World Youth Day San Diego when they have it, but it hasn't come up yet.
That'll happen when the Chargers come back to San Diego.
Oh, no. Well,
I'm
so much
joking.
for that. But the next one they said is going to be in Portugal.
Yes.
And that seems, I think I could get to Portugal, but I don't know. No one's asked me to go yet. So how you been, Tim?
If you're wondering why I'm winded, it's because I ran down the hall.
Oh, you
Now,
didn't.
Folks, I was in a deep discussion with Father Hugh Barber on ousia and energies of the East versus esse and essence in the West in Latin theology.
Wow.
And it was so good, I totally lost track of time.
That'll happen with Father Hugh. We had him for a whole hour yesterday talking about Thomas Aquinas. You know, it turns out he knows a good deal about Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, a couple things. Yes.
That's fantastic. 888-318-7884, the number already. Oh, yes, sir.
Can I give a quick shout out to the good folks in Boise, Idaho?
Oh, would you? Yeah.
Yeah, just got back from Boise. It was actually at Boise State University. Father Donald Calloway and I kind of tag teamed along with Bishop Peter, I want to say Christensen. Forgive me, Bishop.
That would be such a good name for Peter Christensen.
Or is it Williamson?
It's like a perfect. Is
the
the Bishop of Boise?
Bishop's going to smack me for forgetting his last name. But everybody calls him Bishop Peter, though, see? But the bishop was fantastic there as well, gave a fantastic homily. Father Donald Calloway just rocked the house, and then Tim Staples messed everything up.
I know how that goes.
That was 900 men.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You know, whenever you go, in fact, I've got another men's conference with Father Calloway coming up in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge.
Louisiana.
I can't wait. That's where
Right.
I went to Bible college. But we're expecting 1,100 men. You know what? It's exciting to see. Father Calloway and I flew back together on the same flight to San Diego, and we were talking about this. It is exciting, folks, what's going on in the church with men's conferences. 25 years ago, when I first became a professional apologist and started traveling like a maniac, there were far more women's conferences than men's.
Oh, yeah.
It is inverted now. In fact, I'll go to some, I've done this more than once, where I'll speak at a women's conference like on Friday night and then men's conference on Saturday. And always the men's conferences now have more numbers, and there's just more of them. And I think that is exciting, because the problem in the church for the last 56 years, I believe, women are the foundation of civilization. I always say, Si, without the influence of the feminine, you and I are running around throwing spears at each other. That's what we would be doing right now.
I feel like I would lose that. So
But
thank you, women.
they are the keepers of civilization, but a culture, a family, a church is only as strong as its men.
Yeah.
And I think the men have been attacked. Like, the devil has had both barrels blasting for the last 60
Yeah.
years, and to see the Catholic men responding is quite exciting, and that really engenders in me a sense of hope for the future.
That is so fantastic to hear. Like 1,100 men getting together, or 900 men, and that's just wonderful stuff.
Yeah, fantastic.
So that was Boise. When's Baton Rouge? When is that coming up?
Baton Rouge, I believe that will be in March.
Peter
But I'll have
Christensen, by
more
the way.
information on
You were
that.
right, Peter Christensen.
It is Christian.
Christensen,
Christensen,
which
yes.
means the same thing, I'm sure.
Bishop Peter. And I have to say this too. I don't know if the folks here at Catholic Answers even know this. St. Nicholas, I don't know if you know this, but our good friend Father Joe Coffey, did you hear?
Oh, I did hear about this.
He is now bishop-elect.
Yeah.
And he will be ordained a bishop. He was a classmate. Actually, he was 1 year ahead of me in the seminary.
Yeah.
When I was in the seminary, and he's now in the military archdiocese. He will be ordained a bishop on March 25th in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. And he'll
I
be
am
the bishop for
hoping-
the military archdiocese.
Well, I don't know where he will be. I don't.
Oh.
And I'm not sure he knows yet. Yeah,
Oh,
he'll probably be a bishop for the military archdiocese.
Oh, I
but-
thought that was settled. Oh, I didn't
Oh,
realize.
is it? Yeah, that may be. I don't know. I'm just really excited for my good friend.
Right. And we got to have him on to do an hour with us if we can get him to talk about the military archdiocese.
Oh,
we
my
should be
goodness.
talking about that a bit more, because they need priests too, by the way. If you're
They
a
sure
priest
do.
and you've thought about serving in the military.
He loves it, and he just gave my kids an incredible Christmas present this year.
What did you give him?
A paddle board.
What?
Full size with the paddle and everything, man. The huge ones.
Yeah.
Because he took my kids and I, the whole family, out and were showing us all how to do the paddleboard, right? And so we had no idea he had this in mind to
Oh,
give
isn't
us
that
one
great? Now
for
they got
Christmas.
one. That's cool.
Yes.
A whole bunch of calls for you, Tim. I
Hey,
think we should
let's
probably
do it.
go. Let's go to Billy in Connecticut, watching on YouTube Live. Billy, thanks for joining us. Your question for Tim.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Hello.
Welcome.
My question was,
Yes.
I was just reading some of the book Ezekiel, and
Good book.
in a part of it, it talks about that one man shall not bear the sins of another.
Yes.
And I wanted to know how you would explain that corresponding with original sin.
Great question, Billy. And the answer is, in original sin, we don't bear responsibility for anyone else's sin. So, what that text in Ezekiel is condemning is the idea that I would pay the price, pay the penalty for the sin somebody else committed. And that's not what happens with original sin. In other words, in fact, original sin isn't even a mortal sin. Think about this. The sin that Adam and Eve committed was the epitome of a mortal sin, right? They fell from grace. Original sin separates us from God, to be sure, to where someone who theoretically dies, as the Council of Florence declared, with only original sin on their soul, could not have the beatific vision, but they would not go to hell either. Why? Because you're not guilty of a mortal sin. In fact, you're not guilty of a sin, properly speaking, at all when you're born as a little baby. Original sin, in fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us we call it a sin but it's really a sin by analogy. It's not really, it's kind of in its own category.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you can do. In other words, when you go to confession, you don't confess original sin, right? Nobody confesses original sin. Why? Because you did not do it. So it's not even a sin in a properly speaking like that. Okay, so Billy, that's what Ezekiel is talking about. Someone being culpable for the sin of another. Like if somebody commits a murder and their child goes to prison for it, right? Adam and Eve commit a sin and you go to hell for it, right? No, that's unjust, and that's not what original sin is. What original sin is, think of it this way, Billy, it's analogous to, if you've ever been to any hospital in the inner city, in some of the inner cities anyway, they have what's called crack rooms, where newborn babies are sent that are born addicted to crack cocaine. It is an absolute horrid thing to see. But those babies aren't guilty of the sin of smoking crack cocaine.
Right.
They're not. But they are suffering the effects of that sin. And you see those babies, some of them die. Many of them die. Some of them don't, but they're suffering terribly. So what original sin is Adam and Eve sinned. It was mortal for them, right? But we do believe in our tradition that they came back to God, repented, but it was a mortal sin for them. What we've received are the effects of their sin in that they lost their what's called the original gift of integrity they have, their original gift of grace, their state of grace, which included a gift of integrity. There was no concupiscence. Oh my goodness, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yes.
No concupiscence. They had the gift of integrity, meaning, their lower passions were completely ordered by right reason, right? And so there was no disorder in their souls. And this is why, of course, the devil had to tempt them in the higher order with pride, right?
Yeah.
Did God say this? He knows you'll be like him. He's appealing to their pride, which is of a higher order, because there was no lust or anything that he could appeal to, because they didn't have a fallen nature. So at any rate, when Adam and Eve lost that gift of integrity, their state of grace, their nature fell. So that now in original sin, when they communicate their nature to their children, that nature is fallen. So there's no fault on the part of the child when Cain and Abel and all the rest receive that fallen nature. It is fallen. That's what we mean by original sin. And so we have this tendency to sin. We have a real stain on our soul that would keep us from heaven. But there's no personal culpability for that act whatsoever. It represents a fallen nature that we have received that is healed through baptism and throughout the course of our lives until finally we will, if we endure till the end, be completely healed. Okay, Billy? I know it's can be a difficult concept for folks. So do you need any follow-up on that, Billy?
That is very helpful. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Billy. Appreciate that. 888-318-7884, our number. It's open forum. Tim Staples, our guest this hour. All the pro-life stuff here at Catholic Answers is still on sale until the last moment of this month. So if you go over to shop.catholic.com and visit the $5 pro-life category, every pro-life book or DVD or anything, including Made This Way from Trent Horn and Layla Miller, is on sale.
Can I get it too?
Yeah, you can get the $5 deal.
Thank you.
Right. It's going to be extra shipping and handling for you, but I don't know what handling is. There's a charge for handling it.
The guys have to handle it.
Yeah.
And they need a kickback.
Yeah, I need a little something for handling your book. We'll be right back with more Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Father Robert Spitzer, President of the Magis Center of Reason and Faith, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with program info, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. Just go to EWTN.com/wings, fill out your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. When you get yours, send it to all your friends, and they can send it to their friends. And pretty soon, we're covering the whole world with the good news about EWTN. Wings, the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Tim Staples, our guest this hour, and lots of folks on the line to talk with Tim, so we're just going to work our way through them. Christopher in Minnesota, you are up next. Your question for Tim Staples.
So if you can hear me, I have a few questions.
You are coming through loud and clear, Christopher. What's on your mind?
I have a trifecta for you. Plus, I have a side question. That's not really related to the topic. But,
Well, let's start with one. Let's just get a question in
all
here.
right.
Yeah.
Not to worry. If Satan is the father of all evil, we know this. He is the father, prince of darkness, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But if
The father of lies, says our Lord.
father of lies,
Yes.
yeah, father of lies.
John 8:44.
But then what is a white lie? Is the lie itself evil even though you're doing an inherently good act? Or, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, white lie is just a term that folks use for a lie that is certainly not mortal. It's like the husband whose wife asks him, do I look fat in this dress? And he knows if he's honest, his life will end that very day. and so on the spot he says, you don't look fat at all, honey. You are a vision of loveliness, right?
And that second part is always true. No matter
true.
what, that
That's
second
true.
part's always true.
But the reason why I think, white lie is kind of a cultural sort of phenomenon that folks will say. It's a small lie, a little lie. We would say venial as Catholics, but a lie is always a lie. We can make distinctions in our theology about what a lie really is, because at times, we get into the idea of mental reservation, which is somewhat a controversial matter in Catholic circles, but because people don't have, as the Catechism of the Catholic Church said, well, let's back up here, Christopher. Here's the bottom line. Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2485 tells us that a lie is to willfully deceive someone else, right? You tell someone something that is contrary to the truth, and your intention is to deceive that person. That is always wrong. That is always an evil, because it contradicts the purpose of the communicative faculty. Very Thomistic there in the Catechism, paragraph 2485. So you're acting contrary to the communicative faculty, analogous to a person who commits adultery is acting contrary to the sexual faculty, which is ordered toward one woman in the context of marriage. Well, that's what a lie is. So a lie is always, and in every situation, immoral. Not always mortal, though. It can be venial, and that's where the white lie, comes in. We're talking about venial sins and that sort of thing. But then you also have a category that, may sometimes fall under that popular category of white lie, where the Catechism goes on. I think it's 2587. It's right around there. The Catechism also says that everyone does not have a right to the truth at all times. In other words, the classic case is you're a German Catholic, you have a Jewish person hiding in your attic, and the Nazis come, the stormtroopers are at the door. Do you have a Jew in your attic? And you say, no. Well, that is in the tradition of mental reservation. It's not a lie because that person has no right to that information. Now, the Catechism talks about using discrete language versus mental reservation. However, mental reservation is a legitimate tradition in the church as well. And so, you may have people lump that into the category of a white lie also, but I would argue that's not a lie at all.
Because the person doesn't have the right.
The person doesn't have a right to that information, and in fact, you could be culpable for giving that information to that person because they don't have a right to it. So at any rate, that's the bottom line is the white lie. We're still talking about something that's objectively evil, but it's simply not mortally evil. Does that help at all, Christopher?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I just have a couple quick other questions.
Okay. Quickly.
A few of them. And they're really quick.
Well, Christopher. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, real quick. Go ahead.
Not to worry if you want to cut me off, perfectly fine. If a joke is a lie, is it acceptable? It is a joke. I got brought up in an American Irish Catholic family. We joke and lie with each other all the time.
Absolutely. That is not a lie. If you're telling a joke, that is not a lie. We would say
you're not intending to deceive.
That's right. You're not intending to deceive. You're
intending to entertain.
I'm thinking of a different genre, right? In literature, we talk about different genres. Yeah, that's entertainment. It's like the actor, who's in a movie and he tells a lie in a movie. Is that a lie? No, it's not.
Yeah. Or the magician.
The magician.
He's trying to fool you, but it's for entertainment purposes, not to deceive
Exactly.
you.
Does that make sense?
All right, one more, Christopher. I'm enjoying your questions. So one more, real quick, though.
Yeah, absolutely. One side question, because it involves with myths and how to get a book on it, or anything, and it's where to get information on Catholic mythology, and is Cain evil?
All right, well, let's take the Cain evil one, because I understood that one.
Yeah, well, when you say, is someone evil, we have to make some distinctions here, because everything that is created by God is essentially good. Sin can never obliterate the essential goodness of God's creation. So I know my Calvinist friends go nuts on me when I say this, but we say Satan is essentially good. Oh no, heresy. No, he is, because sin by nature, we have to think about this. Sin is like rust on metal.
Yeah.
It's dependent upon the metal for its existence. Well, in the same way, evil or sin is a lack of some perfection that ought to be in a given nature, right? Well, the nature is good and has to exist in order for the evil to adhere in it. Evil does not have substantial being on its own. It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. That's where the religious science goes too far on this and says it's not real. Hindus as well, some Buddhists as well will say evil's not real. No, it's real, but we call it in our Catholic tradition a real privation.
Yeah.
In other words, cancer is real. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You're suffering and dying. But it's a real privation. Those cancer cells and that disorder is a lack of some perfection that ought to be in that body. Okay, and so we don't want to say Cain is pure evil, because there's no such thing. It does not exist. It's impossible for there to be pure evil. So what Cain did, he did evil actions, as does the devil. And the devil, and for those that are damned, their wills are directed toward the evil. They have confirmed themselves in a damned state. But even there, They are, imagine this, what a horrible thing. Hell, you're constantly rebelling against the good. You're so confirmed in your anger and your hatred that you're acting contrary to your nature for all eternity. It's a horrid, horrid thing. Whereas the souls in heaven, their wills are confirmed to the good, and so they act in accordance with their nature. So Cain was not,
essentially or inherent.
Essentially.
Yeah.
However, what Cain did was absolutely evil.
Christopher, thanks very, very much. I hope we got enough of those questions to be satisfying to you. It is open forum today on Catholic Answers Live. Whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call. Maybe you're a Hindu and you just heard what Tim said, or a Buddhist, or
And you wanna
who else did
argue.
you or a Christian. What did you say, Christian Scientist?
Christian Science, yeah.
You're welcome as well. Matter of fact, we'll put you to the top of the line if
Amen.
you'd like to do that. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. More of that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for listening to Catholic Answers Live.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture's moral center continues to fly apart, and with every form of deviance publicly aired and celebrated, we have no choice but to equip our kids to understand about such issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. Silence can no longer be an option. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging on to the shop at Catholic.com.
Al Crestus says, "The greatest doctrinal obstacle to my return to the Catholic Church was fear that Catholics had no basis for or boundaries on the Marian dogmas. If only Tim Staples had written Behold Your Mother then. I can't think of a more insightful, comprehensive, single volume that persuades so thoroughly. Great, truly great piece of apologetics." Order your copy of Behold Your Mother today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the online shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. Join us for Morning Glory.
Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live. Hi, Cy.
Gloria's making me so happy this week. 888-318-7884, the number. It's open forum. Tim Staples here to take your questions this hour. Jim Blackburn next hour. We go now to Taylor in Toledo, Illinois, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. I didn't know there was a Toledo, Illinois. I thought, well, let's see. Let me see if I'm right about that. Hi, Taylor. You have a question for Tim?
Yeah, I do. So my question's about mortal sin. When I'm looking at an examination of conscience, there seems to be a lot that's labeled as mortal. For example, bickering with your spouse is on there. So I've just had the understanding that we must know that a sin is a grave matter and so willingly choose to commit that sin for it to be considered mortal.
Right.
So my question is just, is it possible to commit a mortal sin on accident, or is it safe to say that my soul wouldn't be in a mortal state without me knowing it?
Right. It's a great question. First of all, it's impossible to commit a sin, period, accidentally. There's no such thing as an accidental sin, because even for a venial sin, for a sin to be venial, there has to be an act of the will, which also presupposes some knowledge of what you're about to do. And so even with a venial sin, there's no such thing as accidental. Now, there is a difference here. That's because some folks will say, okay, well, does that mean that a person who doesn't even know what mortal sin is can't commit a mortal sin? It's impossible. And the answer is no. You don't have to have, as some Catholic theologians in the 60s and 70s, were basically concluding that mortal sin was virtually impossible to commit. They made the criterion so ridiculously high that, maybe the devil and maybe Judas or Hitler committed a mortal sin, and that would be about it. But no, you don't have to have a sort of full comprehension that what you're about to do is immortal and have all the, theological nuances. You can know that what you're about to do is just gravely wrong, and not getting the theological definition exactly right. But I know this is really wrong, and I did it anyway, and you can be guilty of mortal sin. All right? So when you're doing an examination of conscience, of course the church is going to lay it out in terms like that, because it's true for us as Catholics. If you're about to do something and you don't believe what you're about to do is in fact mortal, and you commit that sin, then that can be a case where there was not deliberate consent, because you believed that was not gravely sinful when you did it. It's still recommended that you confess it, especially when you discover that it's gravely disordered, because it's still, even though you may not be culpable for mortal sin, there's still an evil there. There are still repercussions for that evil, both in your soul and in what you've done by acting on something that is objectively grave, even though you're not mortally culpable. All right? So the bottom line is, yes, don't go too far in thinking, well, that wasn't mortal because I didn't know that it was mortal. But if you believed that it was venial, that's a different story, because that can be, because a lack of understanding, ignorance. If you go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, there's multiple paragraphs that deal with this. In fact, Pope Francis, in his apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, in chapter 8 there, he actually gives a litany of examples from 2352 in the Catechism and a whole bunch of other examples of how the Church lays out, using Thomas Aquinas, some of the mitigating factors that can reduce an act which is objectively grave to a person only being venially culpable for that act. And ignorance is one of them. Ignorance, coercion, force of habit. There are numerous, immaturity. Yeah. There are all sorts of factors that can mitigate your culpability. But at any rate, I hope I didn't go too far into this. The bottom line is, the key for the Catholic who is examining his or her conscience is, did you know it was grave before you committed it? Did you know, man, this is seriously wrong? Yeah. And maybe if you were on Jeopardy, you may not have gotten it exactly right. But if you believe that this was really wrong and you did it, you need to go to confession for it. Does that help at all?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Taylor. There is a Toledo, Illinois. I looked it up. 1,200 people.
Toledo?
It's a village.
And there's a Toledo, Ohio, too.
Did you know there's a Toledo in Spain as well?
Yes, there is. I'll bet you there's a Toledo somewhere else.
Probably. Holy Toledo is in heaven, however. No, that's on the new earth. Darlene in Phoenix, Arizona, you are up next. Your question for Tim Staples.
Hi.
Yes.
God bless you, and thank you for what you do. My question is, I want to know what ideological colonization means. I read an article in the National Catholic Register, and the Pope's quote is, "We need to give an objective sexual education that is without ideological colonization."
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Oh, my goodness. And our Holy Father is no longer the talk of the town among the LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ community. Isn't that interesting? they're attacking the Holy Father. You know, it was almost comical when our Holy Father first became Pope, and folks took a few lines from him out of context, like, who am I to judge? And, oh, he's going to say homosexual marriage is great and dandy and all this. Barbara Walters was all, woo, right? And now they hate him. Why? Because they discovered he's Catholic. Can you believe it? Pope Francis is Catholic.
Is the Pope Catholic?
Yes, he is.
I always thought that was rhetorical.
Well, as you probably know, our Holy Father, Pope Francis, as Cardinal Bergoglio, and even now that he is as Pope, has used some of the strongest language of any Pope I've ever, at least in our lifetime, when it comes to homosexual acts being always and in every situation gravely disordered. I mean, he has used such language as demonic, you know, talking about homosexual so-called marriage. He has said the adoption of children into these illicit unions is child abuse. And now he has come out and said, using this ideological colonization, the idea is that we in the West and these wealthy countries like the United States, which is probably the worst purveyor of evil of all when it comes to this. You know, the Obama administration was famous for attempting to force homosexual marriage and abortion on third world countries and saying, if you don't do this, we're not going to give you any money. That is the modern day imperialism coming from the West. And it's not only the United States, although we have been the worst. Thanks be to God, our president right now, President Donald Trump, has greatly reversed a lot of these practices. I mean, thanks be to God that President Trump was elected, because if Hillary Clinton was elected, we may be, well, I don't even want to think about it. But the bottom line is the ideological colonization is a sort of imperialism that wants to force on other cultures our own immorality. And so what the Pope is saying is we need a presentation of the moral law that is free from all of these immoral constructs and coercion that's coming from the West, attempting to distort the world when it comes to the moral law. So the Holy Father is right on. And you and I as Catholics really need to speak out when it comes to this, because I can tell you, being here in California, we're living right in the middle of insanity land with our government. Here in California, it's actually against the law to say anything negative about homosexual acts or homosexual marriage in public schools. It's against the law. You're not permitted to.
Do you know, I didn't even know that. There's so many crazy laws that I can't even keep track of it anymore.
And they're coming down the pike left and right. And now that we have a supermajority of the crazy left Democrats in control in California, they've basically got carte blanche. I mean, we're really worried about our kids living here in California. That's another example of this imperialist mentality that's coming.
Do it our way.
You do it our way,
or
it's the highway. And yeah, now it's, you're going to lose your job, you're going to be fired, and so forth. So God bless our Holy Father.
Does that make sense to you, Darlene?
It does. Thank you for clearing that up. That's good.
If I could just recommend a book and a Twitter account to you, Obianuju Ekeocha is an African woman living in England who wrote a book called Target Africa, and it's just about this very topic, how Western countries are targeting Africa, and especially African women. I don't know her Twitter account, but if you just look up Target Africa, her Twitter account will come up, because she does very good kind of reporting to the world about how these impositions of the imperialist Western culture, which used to be thought of as a right-wing thing, but now is a very left-wing thing, is destroying lives in Africa, but also all around the world. Her name, again, Obianuju Ekeocha, and the book Target Africa, and I love referring to her just because I love saying Obianuju Ekeocha.
And here's a key, one addendum. I remember years ago when Alan Keyes, our friend, debated Dr. Alan Dershowitz, the famous Harvard attorney. And they debated on the matter of homosexual acts and marriage and such, and it was disturbing. I thought it was very prophetic, because this is many years ago, and Alan Keyes absolutely destroyed him in the debate. But Dershowitz's responses, when Alan Keyes made an argument from natural law that, look, we can look at the nature of the conjugal act. We know that we are rational beings who are ordered, our intellects are ordered toward the ultimate truth, which is God. Our wills are ordered toward the ultimate good, which is God. That's what we're made for. We are made then to know and worship God. We're rational beings. We can also look at our natures as they are directed toward the ultimate good, and we can understand what these and other actions are for. The conjugal act, for procreation and union between one man and one woman in the context of marriage. Well, when Dershowitz responds, he doesn't respond intellectually. It wasn't an intellectual debate. It was, you're a bigot.
Yeah, right.
Alan Keyes, you are a bigot because you're saying that homosexual actions are always immoral. You are and it became name-calling. And here's a guy with all these degrees and professor at Harvard, at least back then he was. Now he's kind of retired. But my goodness, this is what we have now coming from the left. There's no intellectual argumentation going on here. It is, we are going to destroy you. If you do not agree with us, we are going to destroy you. And we as Catholics need to understand, Cardinal Burke said it the other day, there's a trajectory toward persecution. It's already here around the world, and it's here in the United States. But it's only going to get worse if we don't stand up as Catholics and let our voices be heard, because we can win this thing in the public forum. If we actually get a chance to interact, we win every time. That's what we've got to do. And we may not get it in the public forum that is, a debate on national television, but you and I can win the debate at the grocery store on Saturday when we're shopping and we meet Joe Blow and we enter into a discussion. We can win the debate when our kid comes home from college and says, "Oh, Dad, I think I've lost my faith because Professor Smith said this." This is where we've got to win the debate.
Darlene, thanks very, very much for the call. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Listeners to Catholic radio, I think, benefit most, at least initially, from what I call remedial catechesis. What Catholic radio does is it becomes an echo chamber for the teaching authority of the Catholic Church. And what we're doing is teaching many things which have been neglected over the last 40, 50 years. If you listen to Catholic radio, you know what the Catholic Church teaches.
Al Cresta thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Tim Staples, our guest, and lots of calls for Tim. And Marie, I just need my computer for a quick second. Marie's helping me with my computer. I need to see who's up next. Let's go to Natalie in Denver, Colorado, listening on 1060 AM. Thanks, Marie. You were doing a great job. Natalie, your question for Tim.
Hi. I'm wondering how Pharaoh's free will was affected by God hardening his heart in Exodus.
Right. Great question. Well, first of all, if you read the whole story, beginning around Exodus 7, you'll discover that God didn't harden Pharaoh's heart immediately. Pharaoh first hardened his own heart. And then, in fact, in Exodus chapter 7, verse 13, it says Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Then in verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. And you keep reading down verse 22. Pharaoh's heart was hardened. It doesn't say God hardened his heart until later, after Pharaoh continues to harden his heart. And that's exactly what we see in Romans chapter 1, for example. If you read verses 21 through about verse 29, the scripture says, and I'll back up to verse 21, because they knew God, but refused to acknowledge him as God and give thanks to him as God, that's when God gives them over to a reprobate mind. Now, I jumped down a few verses there. If you go to Romans chapter 1, verses 1 through 29, St. Paul says it multiple times. First, they refuse, and then God hands them over to a reprobate mind. So this should be a warning to all of us in our relationship with God. We must never fall to the sin of presumption. It's very easy in the moral life. Well, I'm going to do this and God will forgive me. Yeah. God is merciful. But the problem is not God. It's your heart can become hardened, and then you don't hear the voice of God any longer. And there comes to that point, that mysterious point, where God says, you know what? For your good, I'm going to back off. You want to keep sinning? I'm going to allow it. And my friends, you don't want to be in that state, because Thomas Aquinas says the greatest, and he's building on St. Augustine here, the greatest punishment or the worst punishment for sin is the removal of grace and the sense of sin. Now, if God does that, he always has an end in mind of your good. But, it's like with your kids. If your kids just keep on disobeying, I know with my 7 kids, man, when they keep doing it, I have to ratchet up the punishment in order to wake them up, because I don't want them to end up as bad people. And so sometimes I got to whack them, right? Sometimes I got to do, more serious punishment. So that's the key. God never coerces. To answer your question directly, I love the way the Catechism of the Catholic Church says it in paragraph 1037. The Catechism says, God predestines no one for hell, right? In order to go to hell, one must freely commit a mortal sin and remain impenitent until death. That's the way you go to hell. And notice, it's not God forcing anything. You go to hell because of your choice. I mean, that's it. I mean, I say this sometimes when I'm doing talks, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not really. I say, let's say it was you. Si?
Yes.
God will let you go to hell if you want to, right?
Yeah.
He will, because he won't coerce. Now, don't get me wrong. He'll turn up the heat on you, and if you got a praying mama, you're in big trouble.
I know. I have found that. I got a praying dad, too.
God will give you grace, and he'll make you miserable, but I'll guarantee you this. He will not force. Just like in the case of Exodus 7:13, it was Pharaoh who first hardened his heart before God did. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
All right. Thanks so much for your call.
Thanks, Natalie. Let's go to Jordan in Detroit, Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Jordan, your question for Tim Staples.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. In 2 Thessalonians 15, St. Paul says, hold fast to the traditions that you were taught either by an oral statement or by a letter of ours. So,
yes.
As Catholics, we say that even the oral are the handing on the tradition that was from Jesus to the apostles that are outside of Scripture. But could you even make a stretch of saying even the letters that he's referring to may be things that are outside of the canonized form of Scripture, like he could be pointing to the Didache or other points, or maybe even has other letters, I don't know. But just asking your opinion on even talking about even the letter piece, could be talking about other forms of authority that were written down.
Absolutely, it could. Yeah, in fact, we know in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I think it's right around verse 5, St. Paul mentions a letter that he wrote to them earlier. Now, that letter has been lost to us, but isn't that wild, right?
Yeah.
Because that letter would have been the inspired word of God. I mean, presumably, Paul wrote it. So, yeah, he's absolutely referring to other letters, and he mentions also some false letters. I'm thinking of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where the first few verses there where St. Paul says, don't let yourselves be shaken, right, disconcerted because of this or that you've heard, or because of letters supposedly sent by us, saying that the day of the Lord was at hand. And he says, no. So there were false letters going around. There were real letters that would have been binding. So, the bottom line is, thanks be to God, we have the church to separate the wheat from the chaff. So some will ask, well, what if we found Paul's letter that he wrote? Right? Would that be included in the canon? And the answer is no. Why? Because some of the criterion that were used, number one, it's not going to be found because we do believe in God's providence and God's in charge here. So, he guides the church in declaring the canon. But the answer would be no, because some of the criterion for Scripture to be part of the canon was it used in the churches? That was one of the most important criterion. Had it been used for centuries in the liturgy? And of course, they looked at orthodoxy. Was it written by an apostolic person and such? And does it agree with the entire analogy of the faith? But no, to answer your question directly, he certainly is referring to other forms of authoritative declarations that could possibly have included a letter he wrote, and it certainly includes the oral tradition, which had been proclaimed for decades before Paul. The first letter of the New Testament was written in about 52 AD, 1 Thessalonians, and 2 Thessalonians was written several months later. So that tells you for 20 years, the gospel was being proclaimed. The oral tradition had been declared definitively, and souls were on the line. Either you accept this, or you're going to hell, folks, all right? And you didn't have any of the New Testament. So the Word of God was already being proclaimed via the oral tradition.
Jordan, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very, very much. Let's see if we can get to Julio, listening here in California on Catholic.com. Julio, your question for Tim.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call.
Welcome.
Happy to.
Thanks. And so I am a Christian. I used to go to a Baptist church, and I am currently in an RCIA program.
Hey, I used to go to a Baptist church too, my brother. Welcome home.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So, my question is though. So I've been studying, with their program, and I've been studying some at home. And I'm wondering, are there specific requirements for me to actually go through and do my confirmation and First Communion? Because I feel like I might not be ready, because I still have some kind of feelings towards some of the Marian doctrines and papal infallibility. And so I'm wondering, is there something that I should, like a list to check off, that once I've done that, I can go and take communion and be confirmed?
Yeah, Julio, what you need to do is talk to the people at your parish in the RCIA program, and you voice to them your concerns. When you become Catholic, in fact, when you receive any sacrament in the Catholic Church, what you are saying by receiving that sacrament is, I believe all that the Catholic Church teaches to be revealed by God. If you don't, then you're lying when you receive that sacrament. Now, you also have to have a moral certitude that you're in a state of grace to receive a sacrament, unless, of course, it's confession, because you're not in a state of grace. That's what it's designed for. Or baptism, if you have, if you're a sinner and you're about to get baptized, that's going to take care of those sins, if you've repented of those sins. But at any rate, the bottom line is, you need to be able to say that. I believe all that the Catholic Church teaches that is revealed by God. So it's not so much a checklist as it is, as you go through RCIA, when particular teachings come up on justification, Mary, salvation, the Eucharist, the papacy, if anything is, as you say, it's bugging you, you're not quite there, then you're not ready. So talk to the folks in the RCIA program. My mother had to do that. My mother waited an extra year, to come into the church. My brother Terry took a little bit longer than I did.
Maybe a book would help him.
Yes, absolutely. In fact,
let's send him a copy.
Let's do that, Si.
Hang on the line there, Julio. We'll send you a copy of Behold Your Mother, a biblical and historical defense of the Marian doctrines by our own Tim Staples. Thank you, Tim, for a very fine hour.
Thank you, brother.
54
It's
minutes.
over already?
Yeah, you got here late, so I'm going to say thanks for 54 minutes. Jim Blackburn next. We're going to continue, so if you're on the line, stay on the line. If you haven't, 888-31-TRUTH is the number.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humanae Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humanae Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humanae Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic of contraception comes up among friends, family, and co-workers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
Is the Church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hey everyone, Carlo Broussard here. Did you know that you can arrange for me and a host of other on-fire Catholic Answers speakers to speak at your conference or parish event? Here's how you do it. Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com and you'll find all the information that you need to book me or our other great speakers. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com. We look forward to seeing you.
Interested in visiting Catholic Answers? If you live in or plan to visit beautiful Southern California, we'd love to have you come by for a tour. You can meet our apologists and staff, visit our chapel, and watch the broadcast of Catholic Answers Live. To arrange a tour, call us at 619-387-7200 or email us at visit@catholic.com.
What difference does it make who or what you worship or what you believe? Sharing the faith used to make some people mad because it challenged their own strong beliefs. Today, it makes a lot of people yawn because they don't have strong beliefs about anything. Religious indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates modern culture. This is Matt Nelson, and in my new book, Just Whatever, I'll take down the building blocks of religious indifference one by one. We'll look at the different kinds of indifference you tend to encounter in your friends and family members to see where they come from and why they're seductive. What you believe matters. Find out why and what to do about it in my new book, Just Whatever. You can order your copy of Just Whatever by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
The Catholic Church claims to be the religion in which the fullness of truth resides, but at times getting to the heart of any particular question of doctrine or morals can lead not only to personal confusion, but conflict and even disagreement among Catholics. In his new book, Teaching with Authority, Jimmy Akin sets the record straight. Teaching with Authority isn't about understanding specific teachings of the faith, but rather about understanding Catholic teaching itself. A unique, valuable, and long overdue resource for Catholics as well as those inquiring about the faith, Teaching with Authority will help deepen your understanding of what the Church teaches by showing you, maybe for the first time, how, why, and where it does.
Get your copy of Teaching with Authority today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. If you've got a question about the Catholic faith, we've got this whole hour ready for you. 888-318-7884 is our number, 888-318-7884. And this hour we welcome Jim Blackburn as our guest. Jim, a longtime member of the Catholic Answers family. Author of many publications for Catholic Answers, including a whole bunch of the 20 Answers series. Jim, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Si. Always great to be here.
I feel like I haven't seen you or talked to you in a while. I can't see you right now because they don't have my monitor set up to see you. But I know it's sad, huh?
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
but it might make your day better if you don't have to look at me, Si. I don't know.
I hardly think that's the case.
When I came in to the studio for the show last month, I wasn't sure if that was a good thing for you or not.
Freaked me out when I saw you walking down the hall. I was like, this is a guy I talk to via video every single time, and boom, there you were right there in the hall. So
right, you did.
Yeah, you did. But that was your intention, wasn't it? You did that on purpose.
It was. I had some free time, and I thought, it's about an hour and a half drive. I thought I'm just gonna pop in and see you guys. I had not actually been in the studio since it had been all updated, so I was really wanting to see that. You and I had never actually personally met,
No,
and so
right.
it was nice to meet you and some of the new staffers there at Catholic Answers for Catholic Answers Live. So it was just a great. I was glad to show up. Yeah,
it's always good when you can get a day pass to get out of the prison for the day and come down and
that's right.
Maybe get another one this year. Just keep on working on your merits. 888-318-7884, the number. Any question at all is welcome about the Catholic faith, about Catholic people, Catholic belief. We'd like to give you an answer if you've got a question, whether you're Catholic or not. 888-318-7884. It's been very busy on the phones today, Jim. Shall we go straight to them?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Tom in Long Island, New York, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Thanks for downloading the app onto your phone, Tom. Your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi, Jim. I was
Hello.
listening yesterday to Father Hugh Barber, and he mentioned that St. Thomas Aquinas is really exclusively a theologian as opposed to a philosopher. And he equated the philosophers with really drawing on pagan backgrounds. And I was just wondering if you could bring out that distinction in St. Thomas's thought between being a theologian versus being a philosopher.
Okay, well, I didn't hear what Father Barber said, so I can't specifically address that, but just I'd be happy to give my own 2 cents on this. And that is that I would consider St. Thomas Aquinas, whose memorial was yesterday. He's a patron saint of apologists and a great theologian in the history of the church. In fact, from the time of St. Augustine, who really was one of the first early theologians to articulate the faith in writing extremely well, that Augustinian theology was something that St. Thomas Aquinas built on. And from the time of St. Thomas Aquinas, even to today, the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas are the foundation, really, are foundational for explaining the Catholic faith, the theology of the Catholic Church. What about the philosophical side of St. Thomas? I mean, certainly he draws on, in some of his own explanation, he draws on ancient Greek philosophy, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Aristotelian philosophy is found throughout Thomas Aquinas' writings, and he draws on that not as a pagan, but draws the truth of the philosophy that we find in that that early Greek philosophy. A lot of the philosophy that we find in those three great philosophers is, even though it's comes from a pagan perspective, it's a philosophy that tries to make sense of the world around them, tries to make sense of what we can see and cannot see, and Thomas Aquinas builds on that and adds theology to it, and makes it even make more sense. So there's certainly a philosophical side to Thomas Aquinas. He also uses what's often called the Socratic method in arguing, based on Socrates, in arguing his points and explaining his theology. Instead of just preaching his theology, he takes the challenges to it. He takes the incorrect understandings of theology, and he articulates those even better than those who would challenge the faith can do. And then he systematically answers those questions and in a way that you can understand the true theology of the church. So the Summa Theologica available online, just take a look at that, sometimes entirely done in that format. So there is a lot of philosophy in the background of St. Thomas Aquinas, but his primary contribution to the church is taking that philosophy and the theology of the church and explaining it in such a way that he articulates the faith in such a way that the Catholic Church still uses much of it today. So does that help answer your question?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Appreciate it. Up next for Jim is Mike in Hanover, Maryland, watching on Facebook Live. Mike, thanks for joining us on Facebook Live. Your question for Jim.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. My question is, I follow Catholic Answers Live almost every day, and if I miss a program, I go back and listen to it the next day. But recently I was on YouTube, and I was watching a program by a Jewish convert to the Catholic faith. His name is Roy Schumann, and in one of his presentations, he said, the second coming of Christ isn't going to happen until there's a conversion of the Jews. And he actually referenced the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and he said it was in there as well. I was wondering if you could expound upon that.
Okay. I would like if you could show me which paragraph in particular you're talking about in the Catechism. That would be helpful. Short of that, let me just say that the Catholic Church, first of all, doesn't hold out that Christ could not return right now, today. However, the Church does recognize in much of the what's been foretold, what to expect in end times, these kinds of things, that there are certain things, such as a tribulation, the Church will go through before Christ will return. Well, we could see really at any point in history, the Church, it goes through tribulation. We're going through tribulation right now with scandal and with the lack of, or the hostility towards religion and culture and such. Concerning the Jews themselves, the Jews, because Christ was a Jew and Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. In fact, Roy Schumann, who you mentioned, I believe is the author of the book "Salvation is from the Jews," which is, a quote from Jesus himself. Salvation is from the Jews, meaning that Jesus was a Jew, and it was the Jewish people who were God's chosen people, and it was from them that the Messiah would come, and that he would build his church and fulfill the promises of Judaism. So Judaism is very important to salvation history. However, all Jews who are saved, who will be saved, will be saved through Christ, who is the final arbiter there between God and man. He is where all salvation comes from. He has given us the Catholic Church and the sacraments as instruments of salvation. And even though there are those who are not a visible part of that, such as Protestants, who are Christians in a certain sense, though they're not in full communion with the church that Christ gave us, there are also those who are not even Christians, such as Jews, who may in some way be connected to Christ, yet are not in that full communion with him through his church. That doesn't mean they won't be saved, though. If they will be saved through Christ and through his church. Now, Mike, do you have the particular quote from the Catechism that you mentioned that Roy Schumann mentions?
Unfortunately, I do not have that paragraph number of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I can go back and listen to his speech on YouTube and find it and provide it to you at a later date.
Sure. Feel free to have the Ask the Call screener for my direct contact information, and I'll be happy to discuss this further with you at a later time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Mike. Right now, you can get a subscription to Catholic Answers Magazine at up to $10 off. 1 and 2 year subscriptions are on sale. And this offer only runs through the end of January, so a few more days left. You can sign up now at CatholicAnswersMagazine.com. It is one of the finest Catholic magazines in the world. Sometimes it even has Jim Blackburn in it. Go to Catholic Answers Magazine. That's true, right, Jim? You're in there sometimes.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been in there, but
well, the magazine's been getting much better. So, that was sorry.
Maybe there's a correlation there.
So, CatholicAnswersMagazine.com and get your savings today.
Many atheists assert the only real form of knowledge is scientific knowledge, thus excluding any sort of religious knowledge, whether philosophical or theological. Such a belief is called scientism, and it's unreasonable for 2 reasons. First, it's self-refuting. Its truth cannot be verified by the scientific method. It's a metaphysical proposition, and as such, is not scientific knowledge. But if science can't verify the truth of scientism, well then, scientism itself cannot be a legitimate form of knowledge, in which case, it's self-refuting. Moreover, scientism undermines science as a rational form of inquiry, because it denies presupposed philosophical assumptions that are necessary to even do science, such as there's an external world outside the minds of scientists. So, to reject God's existence on the grounds that it's not scientific knowledge is simply unreasonable. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
We need EWTN Radio for the reason that Mother Angelica founded this entire enterprise. She always saw this as a spiritual growth network. It was to be an enterprise in media that reached people in all aspects of their life. She saw this as a holistic approach to reaching the whole person in the middle of the world and bringing them truth and life.
Raymond Arroyo thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jim Blackburn, our guest, and lots of folks on the line. Let me go again, that call for if you are not a Catholic person and there's something you'd like to know about us Catholics, or even if there's something you'd like to give us a, let's say, friendly challenge on, we welcome that as well. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. It's okay if it's an unfriendly challenge, but Jim can take it, but I can't. I start crying when that happens. So try to make it friendly just for me. Up next, Alvin in Irving, Texas, watching on YouTube Live. Alvin, your question for Jim.
Hi, Jim. I needed some context I needed some context clarification on 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 27. Where Paul talks about warning against overconfidence. So when Paul says, I drive my body and train it for fear that after having preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. My question revolves around, what do you think is Paul's view on salvation? Because I think I'm confused as in, like, I can't tell if Paul is talking about salvation or just losing the opportunity to serve God while he's alive, that sort of thing.
Okay.
One correlation I can think of is Matthew chapter 10, where we hear that when we are willing to testify Jesus' name in front of others, like Jesus himself will testify us before God the Father, that sort of thing. So I guess a simple question is it okay to not testify God's name because of human nature? And if, I don't know, how does testifying God's name affect our salvation?
Okay. There's kind of a lot of questions there. And I know you started with 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27. And I will, for the listeners, maybe put this in context and explain how theologians understand this. And I think that'll answer a big part of your question. But if we go back to verse 24, Paul says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it." Now, what he's doing is he's setting up an analogy between sports, which were big, sport competitions were big in the first century, just as they are today. And Paul, he's setting up a sports analogy here, and that when you're in a race, you run it to win it. There's only one winner, and we need to run the race of salvation in order to win it. He goes on and says, "Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable." So he's contrasting what athletes are going after, the wreath in that day, the trophy in this day, but what we are going after in salvation, an imperishable salvation. This is the most important thing. And then he talks about himself. "I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air." He's using the boxing analogy, and he says, "But I pummel my body and subdue it, lest after preaching to others I myself should be disqualified." So he's using this boxing analogy to bring up the fight that we all have with our own bodies. It's the flesh leads us astray sometimes. We have to fight the flesh, the temptations of the flesh, in order to not sin. And that's what Paul's talking about. I pummel my body. He sees his body as his boxing opponent. I pummel my body, lest after preaching to others, he's not practicing what he preaches, and he himself could lose salvation. So that's the way I understand this, and I believe many theologians or commentators on this look at this the same way. And I wonder if we, Alvin, from that perspective on 1 Corinthians 9:27, how does that address your questions that you laid out there, and where do you want to go from there?
You clarified the difference between the perishable crown and the imperishable crown.
Okay.
Price type of thing. I think that clarifies the aspect on the relation to salvation sort of thing. And in essence, I asked about this Bible verse because I was just curious if it's a verse that implies that it is possible to lose one's salvation in a way.
Yes. In fact, that's a verse that's sometimes used, that Paul mentions in this, that he himself could be disqualified from the imperishable wreath. He himself has to fight, has to struggle with sin, against sin, so that he himself does not lose his salvation. This passage here is that's exactly what Paul is saying.
Okay, yeah, that answers my question, Jim.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Alvin. Caller called with a question but wasn't able to stay on the line. Her name is Frances, and she says, "My husband heard about a letter that was about Judas. Apparently, in the letter, it states that Jesus asked Judas to betray him. Is this real or true?"
Okay. I'm not familiar with a particular letter about Judas. I know that there was a Gnostic gospel of Judas.
I'm sure that that's what they're referring to. Yeah.
Yeah, and that it's been a while since I've read it, but I know that there's conversations between Judas and Jesus taking place in this Gnostic gospel. So right off the bat, we need to point out that this is not a part of the canon of Scripture. This is not something that we should necessarily believe is true or is real. And in fact, since it comes from the Gnostics were a quasi-sect of Christianity in the early centuries of the church that did not follow the hierarchy of the church that Jesus founded. They were Christians in a certain sense, but they were not in communion with Peter and the apostles, or Peter's successors and the apostolic successors. And so they taught a gospel that was different and very oftentimes contradictory to the authentic gospel that Christ handed on to the apostles and handed on to the church. So this gospel, I don't know, again, it's been a while since I've read it. I don't know of any particular statement of Jesus to Judas, but I would say that we can discount it as not being true if it sounds like it would contradict our faith. And as with many Gnostic gospels, Gnostic writings, while there may be some truth to be found in them, they are largely not consistent with the authentic Christian faith handed down through Peter and the apostles and their successors. So hope that helps. I'd say if you want to try to read maybe what this says, go to Google and just type in the Gospel of Judas, and I'm sure you can find that online, Francis.
Oh, all right, Francis, thank you very much for that call. Sorry we weren't able to get to you before you had to run. Let's go to James in Fort Worth, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. James, your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi, James.
Yeah, I had a question about, I got a friend of mine who's Catholic, and he was telling me that they pray to Mary and Paul, and I was kind of thinking they're just human, and I couldn't find in the Scripture, and he didn't know where to point me to on where it's talking about to pray to them.
Okay. James, can I ask you what, are you a Christian? You're not a Catholic, right? But are you a Christian?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you, as a Christian, do you ever ask other people to pray for you?
Do I ask other people to pray to get? Yes.
Yeah, and you pray. I assume you pray for other people as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When Catholics say that we pray to someone like Mary, that's what we're doing. That's what we're really saying. I understand, James, how the terminology can sometimes be confusing. We don't pray to saints such as Mary, Paul, angels, anyone in heaven. We don't pray to them as though they're God. Our prayers to them are not worship. In fact, if you read some of the formulaic prayers, like the Hail Mary, you'll see that what we're doing is recognizing who they are as saints, and recognizing oftentimes the fact that they're in the presence of God in a much more real way than we are right now, a much more permanent way. And they are able to intercede for us by praying for us in the presence of Christ, in the presence of God. That's what we're doing when we pray to them. Where can we see this in Scripture? Well, in the book of Revelation, there is a depiction of the angels in heaven receiving the prayers of the people on earth, of Christians on earth. They're receiving them as bowls of incense, is the imagery that's used. And they're presenting these prayers to God. So they're interceding for us in heaven by receiving our prayers and extending those prayers onto God. That's an image of it that we can look to the New Testament and find some sort of a scriptural evidence, I suppose, of it. But does that all make sense at this point to you, that that if we can pray for one another, if you and I can pray for each other, you can pray for people, we can ask people to pray for us, why not ask those who are in heaven in the presence of God to pray for us? Does that make sense?
Not really, because I thought Jesus. I don't mean to I'm not disrespecting by no means at all. I'm just asking, but I thought the only way through God was through Jesus.
Yes. Okay. Then again, what good would it do for you to? Do you have children, James?
Yes, sir.
What good would it do for you to intercede for to pray for your children, if if you believe that there's some good that can come from that, praying for your children, then aren't you in a sense interceding for them? You're interceding for them by praying for them, praying to God for them, and that's a good thing. St. Paul tells us that we should pray for one another. That's a good thing for us to do. That's what the saints in heaven are doing for us as well. The main difference is they're in the presence of God in a much more real way than we are.
James, sorry, we have to go to a break. Thank you so much for that. Indeed, it was a very respectful call, and I really enjoyed listening to the conversation. Thanks for enlivening our conversation. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. Jim Blackburn is the guest. More right after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Is the church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. Join us for Morning Glory.
Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live. Hi, Cy.
I'm like Pinocchio. I'm a real boy. Whenever Gloria says hi to me, it reinforces for me that I really exist on this earth. I need that affirmation. I don't know why. Maybe other people don't. Maybe they're like, I know I exist. I'm not. I'm like, I need somebody to say my name on the radio. Then I know I exist. Thanks for saying hi to me, Gloria. Jim Blackburn is our guest this hour. It's open forum. Any question at all about the Catholic faith is welcome from anyone at all. Whether you're Catholic or not, you are more than welcome to call 888-318-7884. Let's go to Lucy in Seattle, Washington, listening on 1060 AM there. Lucy, your question for Jim.
Hello, and thank you very much for taking my call. I have a question about celebrating Catholic Mass. Somebody asked me, and I didn't know, because it right now when we're celebrating, there's two parts: is liturgy of the Word and liturgy of the Eucharist. And they asked me, what did people do before it was set up that way, and when did that happen? And also about the Eucharist, the way we're receiving right now, how was it before it was set up, and when was it set up the way it's right now?
All right, Mass. Give us a little history of the Mass.
Okay, well, the roots of the Mass, go all the way back to the Last Supper. Jesus at the Last Supper did for the first time the breaking of the bread and saying, "This is my body," and the blessing of the chalice, "This is the chalice of my blood," and giving this to the apostles. That was the first communion, the first Eucharist. And he commanded the apostles to do this in memory of me. And the church sees in that Jesus Christ giving them the authority to go on and consecrate the Eucharist, and really the institution of the priesthood in a very real sense here, because that's what's required in order to be able to do the consecration, affect the consecration. We see that the apostles do this from the very beginning. In Acts chapter 2, in fact, we're told that they devoted themselves to teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. Scripture scholars recognize in these words the breaking of bread to be not just a meal, but to be the Eucharistic meal, the celebration of the Eucharist, right here from Acts chapter 2, the beginning, the advent of the church. And prayers, the prayers, we have two parts of the Mass, the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. So here it's broken down into the breaking of bread and the prayers. If we fast forward a little bit to the time of St. Justin Martyr, we see that he actually gave a description of the Mass or of the Eucharistic celebration in the 2nd century. In fact, if the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1345, presents this writing of St. Justin Martyr, and he describes really exactly what happens in the Mass still today, on the day we call the Day of the Sun, or the Sunday. All who dwell in the city and country gather in the same place. The Memoirs of the Apostles, that's the New Testament writings of the apostles, and the writings of the prophets, we refer to the Old Testament, are read as much as time permits. So there we have the liturgy of the Word being described. When the reader is finished, he who presides over those gathered admonishes them and challenges them to imitate these beautiful things. This could be the homily, explaining the Scriptures and admonishing people to follow what the Scriptures are teaching. Then we all rise together, offer prayers for ourselves and for others. Here we have the prayer of the faithful and the petitions, and for all others, wherever they may be. He goes on to say, when the prayers have concluded, we exchange the kiss. This is the exchange of peace. Then someone brings bread and a cup of water and wine mixed together, and the priest presides over them. He takes them. Next, St. Justin describes the institution or the consecration of the Eucharist. And then when he's concluded, we give thanks and say Amen. When he who presides has given thanks and the people have responded, those whom we call deacons give to those present the Eucharisted bread, the Thanksgiving bread, the bread of the body and blood of Christ, and the wine and the water, and take them to those also who are absent. So this is a description of the Mass from the 2nd century, and it still exists largely in this form still today. But the roots of it go all the way back to the Last Supper, and we see the apostles right from the time of the advent of the church in Acts chapter 2, beginning this process of the prayers and the Eucharist. So hope that helps. A basic history of the Mass, really, from Scripture and from the writings of St. Justin Martyr.
Lucy, thank you very much. I'm going to keep moving because we got a lot of folks on the line for Jim today. Tim in Illinois, listening on 88.5 FM. You are up next. Your question for Jim.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. My question involved the clip that you ran about scientism and how it's self-refuting, and that can't really, the scientific method isn't really the method to use.
Was that
for
Tim? If I may ask you, was that Carlo Broussard? Because that's the most recent clip.
I believe so. I
Yeah.
think it was. Yeah, I've heard it a couple times past few weeks, and it's a really great clip. And then I started thinking about the scientific method, how it's not really the right method for. It's really not one of the, I guess, the methodologies for like the proof of God, or it's where the different kinds of proofs we can use. Is that because one of the things I could see is someone saying, I'm just thinking how, someone who's trying to find a way out, who doesn't really want to believe. Let's say, you tell them that, and then, you can go through the philosophical arguments, but they could also say, how do you answer to say somebody comes up with a kind of a completely made up, faith? So you could say, well, you can't test the scientific method against that. You know where I'm going with it? It's kind of like, the proof. Does that make sense? Where I'm going with that?
Tim, I think it does, and I think one thing we need to understand here is that science and the scientific method are really about this world. They're about helping us discover largely the physical world, and God and even the human soul is beyond the physical world. It's we need metaphysics. That's what metaphysics means. It's beyond physics, beyond the physical world. We need something more than just science, which is what we can see and what we can discover with our senses and come to understand with our senses. That's what science is about. Well, God is beyond that. It doesn't mean that we can't know about God. That certainly we can by what He has revealed, and certainly we can trust in what we know about God, even borrowing from the scientific method, the idea of evidence. Let's look at, is there evidence for, say, Christ's claim to be the Son of God and to be human and divine? And when we look at His resurrection, His death and resurrection, we can look at the evidence for the resurrection, the writings, the way people acted at the time, the writings outside of the church about this. We can put all that evidence together, kind of coming from a scientific approach, I suppose, and say that there really is evidence that Christ is who He said He was, and oftentimes what we need to do is kind of weigh that evidence and realize that does it make more sense to believe this, to trust in this, or does it make more sense to reject that? And so we can use a certain amount, I suppose, borrow a certain amount from the scientific method in order to discover metaphysics or embrace metaphysics, but we need to move beyond science. I haven't heard Carlos clip on this, but I suspect that's what he was driving toward, is that we need to move beyond science. Science isn't going to, that's not what science is about. That's not what science is for. It's to prove the existence of God. Science is about this world and about what our senses can detect and how we can come to understand this world. Well, God's beyond this world. God created this world. And so we need to go beyond science in order to have an understanding of God. Okay, Tim, I hope that helps.
That makes total sense. And then there are aspects of science too, just the different laws of, if you look at the laws of the universe, that all scientists, generally agree on, that the fact that those are even laws shows order, and the fact that things are even predictable is just a sign that there's something beyond science here, that philosophy and metaphysics, that's, you have to go to that level, but there's lots of evidence that point to, that we're just not pulling this out of thin air, versus somebody who pulled something out of thin air. There's no historical, archaeological, or scientific evidence that that's true. I think that's kind of a good approach, right? I would say.
Well, sure. I mean, we do have archaeological evidence for much of the historical writings that we find in the Bible, for example, and those can help show that Scripture wasn't just pulled out of thin air. there are. I'm not saying science is completely worthless when it comes to matters of faith. In fact, no. They need to work together. We need to work together with science. An earlier caller mentioned St. Thomas Aquinas and mentioned that he's a theologian, but that there's also an element of philosophy to Thomas Aquinas, and he built on the metaphysical aspects of the philosophy of the great Greek philosophers, and then used theology to explain those, so there is they are really, the metaphysics, the philosophy is necessary. The scientific method is not going to get us there entirely, but that doesn't mean that we have to discount the scientific method altogether. Science, of course, tells us what's true about this world, in this world, what our senses can detect, and that's a good thing too. That can often lead us to an understanding or a belief in God. When we see the intricacies of all this, how could this all have just come about on its own without a great designer? Many scientists, when they start to understand physics and start to understand the universe, come to a belief that this didn't happen by accident. There must be something greater than this. So science can lead at least to an exploration of that.
Tim, we got to leave it there, but thank you very, very much for that call. It is open forum. Jim Blackburn is our guest, and I want one more time. I want to say this before I'm done saying it. All of our pro-life books, DVDs, everything pro-life is on sale until the last minute of this month. So visit the $5 pro-life category at shop.catholic.com and get your pro-life materials for $5 each right now.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Now there's a fast and easy way to get in touch with EWTN. The EWTN Everything number. Call 1-800-447-EWTN to get the latest information on programming, special events, pilgrimages, and more. Our EWTN Family Viewer Services representatives are ready to help you with whatever your needs may be. The EWTN Everything number. 1-800-447-EWTN. EWTN.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. I'm only talking fast because there's a lot of people on the line who want to talk to Jim Blackburn. So up next is Justice in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Justice, your question for Jim Blackburn.
Howdy. I just wanted to ask, at what point can the worship of Mary become sinful?
Right away, Justice. And I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek because we do not worship Mary. It's a common misunderstanding that Catholics worship Mary because we hold her in such high regard. She's the mother of our Lord, mother of Jesus, the mother of God. We do recognize the great significant role she has played and continues to play in salvation history. So we do recognize her to be to be worthy of the most veneration that we can offer to another person, to another human being. Interestingly, when you study the theology of the Church, it makes it easier to understand this. We can go all the way back to Greek terminology, and we find in the Church teaching that what we owe to God, worship that we owe to God, comes from the Greek word latria, and that's a term that the Church continues to use, and it's reserved to God alone. It's adoration, it's worship, and we have that for God alone. We do not exercise latria, worship and adoration when it comes to Mary or the saints, but we do have a form of veneration for Mary and the saints, and that's called dulia. It comes from the Greek word dulia, and dulia is what we owe to other human beings, the saints in particular, but it's recognizing that they are human beings as well. Now, but they're due a certain reverence for, say, the role, as Mary, for example, the role that she's played in salvation history for us, the role the saints play in salvation history for us. The church goes one step further and recognizes that dulia, which is what we owe to Mary and the saints, that there's a form of dulia called hyperdulia, which is owed to Mary alone, just Mary. So we have latria as what we owe to God. Hyperdulia is the form of reverence that we owe to Mary, and dulia is the form of reverence we owe to the other saints and the angels in heaven. So it's important really to understand those distinctions, because it's just such a common misunderstanding that we worship Mary. Does that help, Justice?
Yeah, I totally dig that. I've just heard another apologist explain it more, that worship, that its root meaning is like giving honor. And I really like the way you, and I heard another person separate it exactly the way you did, about how we're giving extreme honor. So I dig that. I just get confused with sometimes all that. I really want to be Catholic. It's just sometimes the papacy, and then some of those newer like certified papacy Mary dogmas, they kind of like get me. I'll get there probably, but it's just, thank you for answering that. I totally dig the way you do that. I know I've heard someone on EWTN say that worship is something different. Like, it kind of explains it away.
And it's true, Justice, that sometimes people will use the word worship in a broader sense than just latria. And that it could be, I didn't hear what the other apologist said, or the other speaker said, it could be that person was using the word worship in a broader sense. This is why I go to the terminology that the church uses, and so that we can distinguish with different words that which is owed to God alone, and that which is owed to Mary, and that which is owed to the saints. And when we use those words, then it can leave no confusion. So again, hope that helps.
Justice, I'd like to send you a book. If you hang on the line, we'll get your address if you'd like it. It's called Behold Your Mother, A Biblical and Historical Defense of the Marian Doctrines. So since you said that's what you'd like to be Catholic, but that's what you're struggling with, I would say you're in the company of about, 1 million, 10 million people. I can't even tell you the number of people who I know who are Catholic now and started out Protestant who say it was the Mary stuff that kept me away for years. And so we'd like you to get here as quick as you can, because Christ would love to meet you in the Eucharist. And so if you'll hang on, we'll send you a copy of that book. Thanks, Justice. Let's go to Thomas from a mystery location. I don't know where Thomas is from, but you're very welcome, Thomas. Your question for Jim.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for taking the call. I'm watching you on YouTube in Houston, Texas. My question basically is, where can I find authentic resources concerning the issue of young children using smartphones, and the danger in using the smartphones that they have access immediately online to pornography, viewing and reading?
Okay, that's
if you could help.
Yep. No, I'm sorry, Thomas. I don't mean to rush you, but since we have quite a few callers I want to get to, let's get to that, because so we have this plague of pornography, children being exposed to pornography early because of their smartphones. What do you have that you can offer, Thomas?
Yeah, and Thomas, and Cy, maybe you can help me with this a little bit. I know that at one point Catholic Answers had owned the website chastity.com, and I believe I don't know if that's still Jason Everett or if that's still affiliated with Catholic Answers, but I believe that still exists.
Right, that's Jason.
That is
right,
Jason Everett. Okay, which I know he writes about this, and you'd find some great resources at chastity.com. In addition to that, Matt Fradd, who used to be one of us, an apologist here at Catholic Answers, Matt this is, I believe, exclusively what he does today is take on the whole pornography thing. And maybe you can help me, Cy, in identifying Matt's website or his resources.
Well, you can just go to Pints with Aquinas, but I would even suggest Matt Fradd's book, The Porn Myth, Exposing the Reality Behind Pornography, because it has chapters that do exactly what Thomas the Caller is asking for. It looks at pornography from the point of view of the user, from the point of the person being used in the pornography, from the point of the view of the seller, from society, the family, all that. And so what Matt Fradd is trying to accomplish there is just exactly what this listener is asking, like, what are the consequences of this? And so I would suggest The Porn Myth. Its subtitle is Exposing the Reality Behind the Fantasy of Pornography, and it's by Matt Fradd. Or you can find him at Pints with Aquinas. Just look up Pints with Aquinas. Nobody else has that. That's Matt.
Okay.
Thomas, thanks. I do want to try to get to everybody, so let me get to Jessica in Irving, Texas, watching on YouTube Live. Jessica, your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi. So I recently obtained a green scapular, and the person who I won the conversion to the Catholic faith, we don't live in the same state. Is it possible for me to wear the green scapular and pray that for her conversion, even though that person is not wearing the green scapular?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not immediately familiar with the parameters of wearing the green scapular off the top of my head, but certainly you can pray for your friend. Is your question whether she needs to be wearing the scapular, or whether you need to be wearing the scapular? I'm not sure I understand.
Her to be
Jessica,
the one to wear the green scapular.
Sorry, Cy, that cut out.
So I'm a little confused as well. So you want to pray for her to receive the blessings of wearing the green scapular, even though she does not wear it? Is that what you're asking?
Kind of. With the green, I looked up what the parameters for what the to achieve the I guess it would be the blessings of the green scapular. Basically, you would give it to the other individual or place it near their vicinity, and that will help them to convert to Catholicism.
Okay.
However, she lives in a different state, and I'm not going to see this person for a really long time.
Got
it.
it.
Possible if I would wear it or something like that.
Yeah, Jessica, I would say absolutely. When we have a scapular is what the church calls a sacramental. It's not a sacrament, so to speak, that is an action that actually does what it portrays. A sacramental, well, it's related to the sacraments. It's something that is more of just a tool to help us in our faith journey, and certainly could be used to help others. Again, the parameters of the green scapular I'm not that familiar with, but I suspect that if you're being told that just having the scapular in the presence of someone else is going to help aid in their conversion, then it would just be by the example maybe of you wearing that scapular that would help them. Don't think of the scapular as being magical somehow. Don't think of the scapular itself as having some sort of power of its own in and of itself. No, it's what we do with the scapular that makes the scapular powerful for us. And if we wear a scapular and it reminds us of why we're wearing it, what we're praying for, and eventually what it is, the reason that we're wearing the scapular, then it's doing its job. As far as if you're wearing it for the conversion of someone else or hoping for the conversion of someone else, certainly wear it to remind you to pray for your friend and keep your friend in prayer when you see that scapular. Pray for your friend, pray for her conversion. Those kinds of things can make then the scapular effective in that way, in that regard, for your friend, Jessica. Does that help? Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica, very, very much. And it's interesting, Jim. God gives us all these various blessings as Catholics, but we have to always be on guard against being superstitious about them.
That's right.
Like it's like an amulet or something. It's not. That's not what it is.
Exactly.
God's grace is the thing.
That's right. These things can be helpful reminders to us, but as soon as we start imagining some magical power to them, we've gone astray.
But Jessica, what a beautiful thing to be concerned for your friend in that way. Go ahead, Jim.
And I would encourage in paragraph 1667 of the Catechism and forward, talks all about sacramentals.
Jim Blackburn, thank you very much for a very fine hour.
Thank you so much for having me, Si.
You can find Jim's books and other things at Catholic.com. Just look under Jim Blackburn. You'll find all kinds of stuff about him. Tomorrow, 2 fantastic hours, but I'll leave you in suspense. See you then, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.